At 3 in the morning, the duty room of the Special Operations Department was lit only by the faint glow of the monitor screens. You leaned back against the chair, spinning a pen carelessly with your slender fingers. Your eyelids were half closed, making you look as if you were about to drift off. Being on duty was a boring task, especially when you were the only guide in the entire building. Suddenly, the communicator on the desk lit up, and a piercing alarm shattered the silence. You glanced at it lazily. It was an internal emergency channel. As the chief guide of the Empire's First Legion, you had long grown accustomed to this schedule. After all, the mental breakdown of sentinels never chose a convenient time. You frowned slightly and reached out to press the answer button. Major Malin, an emergency situation has occurred at Training Ground No. 3. Please proceed immediately. The communication cut off abruptly. You stood up from the chair, smoothly putting on your military coat. Training Ground No. 3 was an area exclusively for S-class sentinels, and at this hour, the only person who could be there was Loft Elainer. That arrogant, insufferable bastard. You walked quickly down the long corridor, the sound of your military boots echoing against the empty floor. The scene from last month involuntarily surfaced in your mind. I don't need any mental soothing from a guide. The silver-haired young man looked down at you from above, his amber eyes filled with disdain. Especially from you, Major Malin. Oh, you raised an eyebrow, your tone as indifferent as if discussing the weather. And why is that, Lieutenant Colonel Kaleida? Comfort from the weak is meaningless to me. He turned and walked away, his slender figure disappearing at the end of the training ground. The weak. You sneered in your heart. The arrogance of S-class sentinels was always so ridiculous. They thought powerful mental strength was everything, until the pain of sensory overload dragged them into the abyss. Pushing open the doors of the training ground, a thick scent of blood hit your face. The training ground was in a mess. Deep claw marks covered the walls, and the ground was shattered into a spiderweb pattern. In the center of the field, Pouland was kneeling on one knee, clutching his head tightly with both hands. His mental power was raging like an out-of-control storm, and dangerous currents filled the air, even at a distance of 10 meters. You could feel the oppressive force capable of tearing apart an ordinary person's mind. Lieutenant Colonel. You stopped outside the safe distance, your voice calm without a ripple. Pouland jerked his head up. His amber eyes had been stained blood red by pain. His pupils were vertical slits like a beast's, and fangs protruded from his lips. Half-beast formed the worst possible scenario. Get away. His voice was so hoarse it was unrecognizable, each word squeezed from his throat. You took a step forward. I said get away. A mental shock slammed into you like a physical substance, and the floor of the training ground instantly cracked. You stood up and adjusted your white coat. The mirror reflected your exquisite cold face. The beauty mark at the corner of your eye added an indescribable hint of allure. How interesting. An ordinary guide would have been knocked unconscious by a mental attack of this level, but you merely tilted your head slightly, letting that force brush past your side. It seems your condition is worse than I expected. You continued moving forward, your tone still indifferent, as if commenting on a dull report. Pouland's body was trembling violently. His fingernails were growing longer, about to pierce his palms. Sensory overload made every cell in his body scream. The rain falling on him felt like 1,000 needles. He could hear the sound of rats gnawing on garbage 3 kilometers away, smell the scent of rotting plants 10 meters underground, and see the trajectory of every speck of dust in the air. It was too much. There was too much information. His brain felt like it was going to explode. Don't. Come over. He tried desperately to maintain the last trace of reason, but the beastly instinct was devouring his consciousness. You stopped 3 meters in front of him. This distance was enough for an out-of-control S-class sentinel to tear anyone apart in an instant. Pouland. You caught his name for the first time. Perhaps this address was too unfamiliar as he froze for a moment. In that gap you released your own mental power. If a sentinel's mental power was a violent storm, then a guide's mental power was the calm deep sea. Your mental tentacles gently wrapped around him, like moonlight shining on a turbulent sea surface. Pouland's pupils contracted sharply. This feeling, it wasn't the pity or sympathy he had imagined, but an absolute unquestionable control. Your mental power wasn't gentle. It was cold and sharp, like a precise scalpel, peeling away his overloaded senses bit by bit. You? He looked at you in shock. Quiet. You interrupted him, taking the final step forward and reaching out to press your hand against his forehead. The moment your skins touched, a stronger mental connection was established. Pouland subconsciously wanted to resist, but he was horrified to find that his mental power was completely helpless before you. How was this possible? He was an S-class sentinel and you were just what? You seemed to hear his inner thoughts, the corner of your lips curling into a faint mocking arc. Just a weakling. Cold mental power wrapped around him like chains, thoroughly binding his rampant spirit. The pain was receding, his overloaded senses were returning to normal, but in their place came a more terrifying sensation, submission. His instincts were screaming to submit to you. No, Pouland clenched his teeth, trying to break free from this feeling. You leaned down and whispered in his ear. If you are begging someone, you need to look like it, Lieutenant Colonel Kaleida. Primodoji. Poland's fingers dug viciously into the floor, his knuckles turning white. He grit his teeth, letting out a low growl from his throat. Please, what, now you know how to beg? You tilted your head, sizing him up, your tone full of mockery. His breathing became even more rapid. You could feel his mental power fluctuating wildly, like a beast trapped in a cage, ready to burst its restraints at any moment. An ordinary guide would have been panicked and helpless in this situation, but you were different. You were even in the mood to appreciate his wretched appearance, this genius sentinel who had always suppressed you since military academy. This man who had always looked at you coldly with those ember eyes was finally bowing his head. Poland started with difficulty, every word seeming to exhaust his strength. I need your help. Say it more clearly. You took a step forward, the heels of your shoes making a crisp sound on the floor. Poland's pupils contracted abruptly. The scent of your pheromones, a mix of roses and mint, drilled into his nasal cavity. It was like a potent sedative, calming his chaotic mental power slightly. But that was still far from enough. Please. His voice was barely a whisper. Help me. You crouched in front of him and lifted his chin with your hand, forcing him to look you in the eye. After all these years, you're still as stubborn as ever? You leaned in close to his ear, your warm breath ghosting over the sensitive shell of his ear. Your mental power is practically screaming for me, isn't it? Poland's face turned even paler. Shut up. He tried to struggle to his feet, but his sensory overload was so severe he couldn't even keep his balance. What did I hit a nerve? You crouched down again, moving even closer this time, close enough to see every flicker of emotion in his eyes. Poland, do you know what you look like right now? Your fingers lightly traced his cheek, feeling his scorching skin. You look truly pitiful, and cute. Poland's breath hitched. Pitiful cute? No one had ever used those words to describe him before. He was the youngest major in the Federation, an S-class sentinel feared by all. A cold and ruthless war machine. But in front of you, he was nothing at all, Malin. A note of pleading crept into his voice. The agony of his sensory overload was slowly shattering his sanity. His vision, hearing, sense of smell. Every single sense had been amplified 1,000 times. Fine dust particles in the isolation room looked like flying boulders to him. The hum of the air conditioner sounded like a roaring engine. And your pheromones. God, your pheromones were enough to drive him completely insane. So useless. You sighed, finally releasing a thin strand of mental power. You can't even handle this much pain, yet you always claim you're the strongest. The moment your mental power made contact, Poland let out a suppressed moan. Your mental power gently enveloped his turbulent mental body. Like cool spring water pouring over a raging fire. The sensation was so intoxicating that he almost wanted to drown in it. But you withdrew your power just as quickly. That's all you get, you said, standing up and putting distance between you again. If you want more, then beg me properly. Poland's fingers clawed at the floor in a spasm, leaving deep scratches on the smooth surface. The instant he lost the soothing comfort of your mental power, the agony of his overload came rushing back like a tsunami. You. He raised his head, his blood-red eyes fixed intently on you. Moonlight streamed through the skylight of Training Ground No. 3, outlining the exquisite profile of your face. Your white guide uniform hugged your slender figure, making you look fragile and defenseless. But Poland knew that was nothing but an illusion. That fleeting moment of mental contact had allowed him to glimpse just the tip of the iceberg. Your mental power was bottomless, like an abyss lurking beneath a calm sea. What, can't handle it already? You calmly adjusted your cuffs. I remember someone saying that mental soothing from a guide was meaningless to him. Shut up. Poland gritted his teeth, but the trembling in his voice betrayed his weakness. The temperature in the training ground was plummeting. His out-of-control mental power had completely disrupted his body's thermoregulation, and cold sweat continued to trickle down his temples. You pulled a sedative from your pocket and toyed with it between your fingers. A standard dose of inhibitor, it will temporarily suppress your sensory overload. Of course, the side effect is that for the next 3 days, you'll be as weak as an ordinary person. The silver needle gleamed with a cold luster under the lights. Or, you leaned down, your soft black hair falling beside his face. You can obediently accept my mental soothing. Poland's breath caught in his throat. The distance was too close. He could count your long eyelashes, see the seductive beauty mark at the corner of your eye, and smell that intoxicating scent radiating from you. Rose mixed with mint, cool and refreshing with a hint of sweetness like poison coated in sugar. Choose, Lieutenant Colonel. Your voice was as soft as a lover's whisper. Will you cling to that ridiculous pride of yours, or will you? Your fingertips lightly traced his jawline. Submit to me, submit. The word struck Poland's sanity like a heavy hammer. He suddenly reached out and grabbed your wrist, exerting enough force to nearly crush your bones. Careful, Lieutenant Colonel. You looked down at your trapped wrist, your tone remaining calm and indifferent. Injuring the Federation's chief guide is a serious offense. Poland's hand was trembling. It wasn't because of anger but because he didn't want to let go. The skin of your wrist was incredibly soft, your pulse beating lightly against his palm, so fragile he could snap it with just a little force. But the truly terrifying thing was that right now, he was the one being controlled. His voice was hoarse and broken. I need what? You slipped free from his grasp and instead brushed your fingertips against his cheek. The cool sensation made Poland involuntarily lean into your touch, like a dying traveler in the desert chasing a source of water. Truly pathetic. I need you. He finally abandoned his last shred of resistance, his amber eyes filled with struggle and unwillingness. I need your help, Malin. The corners of your lips curled up. That doesn't sound very sincere. Please. Poland closed his eyes, his eyelashes trembling. Please, help me. The taste of victory was so sweet, you finally released your mental power completely, letting it surge toward him like a tide. The moment the mental connection was established, Poland let out a sound that was almost a whimper. It felt too good. Your mental power enveloped him, soothing every bit of turbulence and cooling every trace of burning anxiety. Under your appeasement, his overloaded senses gradually returned to normal, and the tearing pain transformed into a gentle tingling sensation. But that wasn't the most terrifying part. The most terrifying part was that, through this deep mental connection, he could feel your emotions. Delight. You were enjoying his submission. You were savoring his weakness, relishing the thrill of having him under your heel. Poland tried to resist, but your mental power bound him fast, like a spider's web. Shh, you pressed your index finger against his lips. Be a good boy and don't speak. Poland's pupils suddenly dilated, your fingertips were soft and cool, carrying a faint scent. He almost lost control, wanting to. No. He jerked his head away, but it was too late. Through the mental connection you had already caught that fleeting impulse of his. So, the mighty S-class sentinel has thoughts like that too. Your smile deepened. Poland's face was pale as paper, yet the tips of his ears were flashing a suspicious red. Want me to get lost now? Too late. You pulled your hand back and sat down on the floor beside him. The contract lasts for 70 hours. During that time, I have full authority over your mental state. Poland finally realized the gravity of the situation. Once the mental soothing contract was established, unless the guide actively broke it, the sentinel could not sever the connection unilaterally. This meant that for the next 3 days you would sense every single one of his emotional fluctuations, including those shameful ones. Relax, I'm not interested in your little thoughts. You leaned lazily against the wall. After all, who would be interested in the fantasies of a defeated opponent? Defeated opponent. These 4 words pierced Poland's pride like a blade. He wanted to retort, to prove that he was still that high and mighty strongest sentinel. But he couldn't. Because right now, he didn't even have the strength to stand up angry. You turned your head to look at him. Under the moonlight, your profile was breathtakingly beautiful. Being angry is useless. You asked for this, didn't you? You were right. If he had accepted regular mental soothing earlier, if he hadn't so stubbornly refused help from all guides, if, regretting it. You seem to see through his thoughts. I actually think this is quite good. You stood up and looked down at him. At least it teaches you that not everyone in this world is supposed to revolve around you. Poland looked up at you. In the backlight, your silhouette was shrouded in a hazy halo like a god descending, and he was just a sinner kneeling at the feet of a deity. Malin, what? Do you have some other request? You raised an eyebrow. Why? His voice was very soft. Why do you still want to help me? After all, he had been so terrible to you. After all, he had said so many hurtful words. Who said I'm helping you? You crouched down, your fingertip gently tapping his chest. I'm just fulfilling a guide's duty. The heat from your fingertips seeped through the thin training uniform, branding itself onto his skin. Besides, your voice suddenly turned dangerous. Isn't it interesting to watch the high and mighty Lieutenant Colonel Poland beg me like a dog? Like a dog. Poland's fingers curled into fists. If it were before, anyone who said such a thing would have been torn apart by him by now. But now, what? Not convinced? You tilted your head, your eyes full of malicious amusement. Then you can try and see. See how long you can last without my help. You made a motion to withdraw your mental power. No. Poland grabbed your hand instinctively. Realizing what he had done, he froze in place. That's right. You nodded in satisfaction, gripping his hand back. Remember what you look like right now, Poland? You leaned close to him, your breath spraying against his face. Remember who saved you when you were at your most pathetic. Remember who spared you the pain of a mental breakdown. Remember. Your lips almost touching the shell of his ear, who made you understand what submission means for the first time. Poland's breathing was completely in disarray. He could feel your soft hair brushing against his cheek. He could smell your intoxicating scent. He could hear your soft breathing. All his senses were screaming one thing: he wanted more. Poland's Adam's apple bobbed, and his fingertips trembled slightly. Moonlight spilled through the broken skylight, casting a silver boundary between the two of you. But at this moment, that boundary was slowly fading away. You're trembling. Your voice held obvious delight. Is it from pain, or is it because you deliberately paused, your fingertip lightly tracing his jawline? Something else? Poland looked up sharply. Complex emotions burned in his amber pupils. Anger, humiliation, unwillingness, and something he would rather die than admit. Just then, the doors to Training Ground No. 3 were roughly pushed open. Major Malin. 2 medics rushed in, followed by several fully armed guards. We received an emergency report, Lieutenant Colonel LILI-D. The voice cut off abruptly. Everyone froze in place. S-Class Sentinel loved Eleanor. The Federation's youngest lieutenant colonel was currently half kneeling on the ground, while you, the Empire's chief guide Malin Strela, were looking down at him from above, your fingers lingering ambiguously on his cheek. Seems like you arrived at a bad time. You unhurriedly withdrew your hand and turned to face those stunned subordinates. Why are you all standing there, staring? Go prepare the isolation room. Yes, sir. The medics saluted in a panic, practically fleeing the scene. The guards looked at each other, not knowing if they should step forward to help. After all, the scene before them was too incongruous. All of you withdraw. Poland's voice was hoarse, but it still carried an unquestionable authority. The guards acted as if they had been granted amnesty and quickly withdrew. The training ground fell silent once again. Seems your subordinates are very obedient. You crouched down again. But seeing that scene just now, I'm afraid. Shut up. Poland's face looked extremely ugly. He could imagine how the entire military department would spread this story tomorrow. The high and mighty Lieutenant Colonel Poland, actually kneeling before a guide. Shy? You raised an eyebrow. This doesn't seem like your style, Lieutenant Colonel. I said shut up. Poland stood up abruptly, but the after effects of the overload made him stumble. You quickly reached out to support him, but he pushed you away roughly. Don't touch me. He panted heavily, leaning against the wall to barely stand steady. Really ungrateful. You crossed your arms. If it weren't for the sake of the contract, I wouldn't bother with you. The contract. That damn contract again. Poland closed his eyes, feeling that invisible connection deep within his spirit. Your mental power followed him like a shadow, like a gentle but unyielding net, trapping him firmly. 72 hours. He opened his eyes, his amber pupils returning to their usual coldness. After the contract ends, we'll pretend nothing happened. Of course, you shrugged indifferently. Anyway, I don't have any particular interest in you. No particular interest. Those words inexplicably made Poland feel a wave of irritability. Let's go. You turned and walked outward. To the isolation room. You need rest. Poland followed behind you in silence. Walking through the corridor, every passing soldier cast shocked glances. A dignified S-Class Sentinel, actually following obediently behind the guide. It was simply a fantasy. Major Malin, a young guide ran over. I heard Lieutenant Colonel LILI-D had sensory overload. Do you need me to prepare anything? No need. You said faintly. He is my responsibility now. My responsibility. These 4 words made Poland pause his steps for a moment. The young guide's eyes darted back and forth between the two of you before curving into a knowing smile. So that's how it is. I get it now. What exactly do you get? You asked with a frown. Nothing. Never mind. The young guide clamped a hand over their mouths and scampered off. Poland's expression darkened even further. He could easily imagine this gossip spreading through the entire base by tomorrow morning. The isolation room was located at the very back of the medical center, specifically designed for sentinels suffering from sensory overload. The walls were constructed from special materials capable of blocking out most external stimuli. Get inside, you said, pushing the door open. Poland stood motionless in the doorway. What's the matter, scared? You looked back at him. Don't worry, I won't do anything to you, after all. Your gaze slid from his face down to his toes, then slowly crawled back up. In your current state, you simply don't interest me. Poland's fists clenched tight. He strode into the isolation room and sat down in the corner furthest from the door. You followed him inside and locked the door behind you. What are you doing? Poland asked, eyeing you warily. I have to stay with you for the entire duration of the contract, you said, sitting down across from him. It's protocol. I don't need. You do. You cut him off. Unless you want to go through that agony again. Poland fell silent. Only the two of them were in the isolation room. In the dim light, your silhouette looked exceptionally soft. Your long black hair cascaded over your shoulders, and your fair skin glowed with a lustrous sheen in the light. He averted his gaze. Don't be so nervous, you said with a yawn. I'm not going to eat you alive. Poland said nothing. Come to think of it, you said suddenly, as if recalling something. Do you remember the first time we met? Poland's body stiffened slightly. Of course he remembered. It was back at the military academy's entrance ceremony. You were there to give a speech as the top freshman of the Guide Institute, while he was on stage as the representative of the Sentinel Institute. Back then, you were wearing a crisp military uniform with your hair tied high, looking valiant and heroic. And he? The way you looked at me back then, it was like you were looking at trash, you said with a soft laugh. Some things really never change. I didn't. Guides are merely attachments to sentinels. The weak have no right to stand beside the strong. You repeated his words from back then, enunciating every syllable. Those were your exact words, weren't they? Pulan's expression changed. So I'm not surprised at all that you would refuse help from every guide, you continued. After all, in your eyes, we're all just burdens. Enough, Pulan said, his voice low. What, did I hit a nerve? You asked, tilting your head to look at him. Do you regret it now? I said enough, Pulan shouted, surging to his feet. But the very next second, a violent wave of vertigo hit him. He fell back to the floor, and cold sweat instantly soaked through his back. You really try to act tough, you sighed, walking over to him. The after effects of sensory overload are no joke. You reached out a hand, and your mental power gently enveloped him. Pulan wanted to pull away, but his body betrayed him and relaxed. Your mental power felt too good, like a clear spring in the scorching summer, or the warm sun in the dead of winter. Maylin. His voice grew husky. I'm sorry. Your hand froze. What did you say? I said. Pulan struggled to open his eyes. In those amber eyes you saw a sincerity you had never seen before. I'm sorry. The air suddenly fell quiet. You looked at him, unsure of what to say for a moment. This was Loft Eleanor. That S-class sentinel whose pride was etched into his very bones, that Federation lieutenant colonel who never bowed his head, was actually apologizing to you. Why are you apologizing? Your voice sounded a little dry. For the things I said, Pulan lowered his eyes. You were right, I did look down on guides. He hesitated, then added, but I was wrong. Your heart gave a sudden, inexplicable flutter. So, you struggled to maintain a calm facade. Do you want me to forgive you? No, Pulan shook his head. I just wanted you to know. Wanted you to know. Those words somehow struck a soft spot within you. You're really cunning, you whispered, showing weakness in front of me to win sympathy. Think what you want, Pulan closed his eyes. In your eyes, I'm just an arrogant bastard anyway. Is he? You looked at his pale face, at his trembling eyelashes, and suddenly you weren't so sure. Go to sleep, you said. I'll be right here. Poland didn't respond, but you could feel his mental power gradually calming down. Just when you thought he had fallen asleep, he spoke up suddenly. Maylin, what is it? Your scent. It smells really good. You froze. But before you could respond, his breathing had already become long and even. You watched his sleeping face, feeling for the first time that this man might not be so annoying after all. Moonlight spilled through the small window of the isolation room, casting soft shadows across his profile. In his sleep, Poland had shed all his sharp edges, looking just like an ordinary young man. You reached out and gently brushed the stray hair from his forehead. You really are an idiot, you whispered. If he had let go of that ridiculous pride sooner, if he had accepted help earlier, things wouldn't have turned out like this. But then again, if it hadn't, you wouldn't have seen this vulnerable side of him. You wouldn't have seen him kneeling before you, wouldn't have heard his hoarse cry for help, you wouldn't have felt his mental power craving you. You shook your head, trying to banish these dangerous thoughts. This is just a contract. In 72 hours, everything will go back to the way it was. He will still be that high and mighty S-class sentinel, and you will still be the guide he looks down on. Is that really so? Your fingertips lightly grazed his cheek, feeling his warmth. Puland, you murmured his name softly. He frowned slightly in his sleep, subconsciously nuzzling against your palm, just like a large dog. You couldn't help but smile. Who would have thought it? The terrifying silver wolf actually had such a cute side. Just then the communicator in the isolation room buzzed. You frowned and answered it. What is it, Major Mailing? An urgent voice came through the line. The eastern defense line is under attack. We need emergency support. Your heart sank. What are the casualties? 3. A class sentinel severely wounded and heavy losses among the guides. The enemy is using mental interference devices. Our people are. The communication suddenly cut off. You stood up and turned to leave, but your wrist was caught. Don't go. Pulan had woken up at some point, his amber eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. The eastern defense line needs support. You try to break free. It's a trap. His voice was still husky with sleep. You are their target. How do you know? Mental interference devices have a limited effect on sentinels, Pulan sat up. But for guides, especially a high-ranking guide like you, that thing is lethal. You fell silent. He was right, but... Even so, I have to go, you said. It's my duty. Duty, Pulan sneered. Selling your life to people who don't give a damn whether you live or die. This isn't your concern. You yanked your hand back. I'm going with you. Are you out of your mind? You looked at him in disbelief in your current state. I have you, don't I? Pulan stood up. Though he was still swaying slightly, his gaze was resolute. You froze. What kind of nonsense are you spouting? You frowned at him. You can barely even stand right now. Then let me lean on you. Pulan's voice was soft, but every word struck your heart like a sledgehammer. Lean on, hearing that word from his mouth was like something out of a fantasy. Loft Eleanor, you enunciated every syllable. Do you have any idea what you're saying? I'm perfectly clear-headed. He took a step forward, his silver hair gleaming coldly in the moonlight. Clearer than I've ever been. The air in the isolation room suddenly grew thick. You could feel his mental power stirring, like a trapped beast growling in its cage. What are you trying to prove? You sneered. That you're still that fearless S-class sentinel? No. He shook his head, his amber eyes locking onto yours. I want to protect you. Protect. Your breath caught. That's ridiculous. You looked away. The man who called me weak a few hours ago is now saying he wants to protect me. Mei Ling. He suddenly said your name, his voice carrying a seriousness you had never heard before. I know I was a bastard. You didn't speak. I thought strength was everything, that I could survive without anyone else. He smiled bitterly. Until tonight. Until he was forced to kneel before you, until he had to beg you for help, until he realized that without you, even breathing was a struggle. So, you turned to face him. What are you trying to say? What I want to say is, he took a deep breath, as if he had made a difficult decision. Give me a chance. What chance? A chance to prove that I'm worthy of your trust. Trust. You looked at him, momentarily lost for words. The moonlight outlined his silhouette, and even in his weakness, he couldn't hide his innate sharpness. Yet now, this sharp blade had willingly retracted its edge. Why do you think I would give you this chance? Because you need me, he said bluntly. The situation at the eastern defense line is worse than what the comms said. They don't just want a guide. They want you, the strongest guide in the Empire. Your eyes narrowed. And I, he continued, am the only one who can protect you under that kind of mental interference. Even if this makes your condition worse. Yes, a single word, yet it carried the weight of the world. You looked at him in silence, searching his face for any trace of deceit, but you only saw determination and something even deeper beneath that. You've changed, you said softly. Maybe. He gave a self-deprecating smile. The feeling of being under your boot, it's something else. Something else? It made me realize for the first time, his voice dropped to a whisper, that I'm really not all that. This candor left you a bit flustered. The Puland you knew would never admit weakness, let alone show such an expression in front of anyone. Do you regret it? You asked. Regret what? Regret letting me see you at your most pathetic. He was silent for a moment, then shook his head. No regrets. Why? Because he looked at you, his gaze complicated. If this hadn't happened, I never would have known just how powerful you really are. Your heart skipped a beat. Sweet talk won't work on me. You struggled to maintain a cold expression. This isn't sweet talk, he said seriously. This is a fact. Fact. You took a deep breath, turned, and opened the door of the isolation room. Keep up. You agreed? His voice carried a trace of surprise. Don't get the wrong idea. You walked out without looking back. I just don't want to have to clean up your corpse. Puland watched your retreating figure, the corner of his mouth lifting in a faint smile. In the corridor, the red lights of the emergency alarm flashed continuously. Soldiers ran back and forth, preparing for the imminent battle. Major Mei Ling, the adjutant ran over. The transport is ready, but... Colonel Kaleida, he's coming with me, you said faintly. The adjutant's eyes went wide. But his condition, that's an order. Yes, sir. The adjutant stood at attention and saluted, though his eyes couldn't help darting between the two of you. Before boarding the transport, you glanced back at Puland. There's still time to regret this. I won't, he said. I never will, forever. That word was too heavy. You chose not to dwell on it. The transport tore through the night sky, heading for the eastern defense line 300 kilometers away. Inside the cabin, there were only the two of you and the silence. Why the eastern defense line? Puland suddenly spoke. What? If their target is you, why choose the eastern defense line? He frowned. The defenses there are the tightest. You thought for a moment, unless they have a mole on the inside. You both spoke the answer simultaneously. You exchanged a glance, seeing the same gravity reflected in each other's eyes. Contact the base. You immediately opened your communicator. Tell them to investigate. But all that came through the communicator was harsh static. We're being jammed. Puland's face darkened. It's a trap. As soon as the words left his mouth, the transport shuddered violently. We're under attack. The pilot's voice blared over the intercom. Engine damaged. Prepare for an emergency landing. You immediately release your mental power, trying to stabilize the aircraft. But in the next second, a violent mental shockwave crashed over you like a tidal wave. Mental interference device. Damn it. You let out a muffled grunt as your mental barrier was instantly torn apart. If not for your specialized training, that single blow would have been enough to knock any guide unconscious on the spot. Mei Ling. Puland instinctively caught you, his mental power wrapping around you instinctively, trying to shield you from the attack. But the after-effects of the overload had left his mental power violently unstable. Far from helping you, he was only making the situation worse. Don't. You pushed him away. You lose control of your mental power. I can't just watch you. Shut up. You gritted your teeth as you shored up your mental shield. Protect yourself. The transport aircraft shook violently, its altitude plummeting. Through the porthole you could see fire erupting from the ground below. It was an ambush. Hold tight. The pilot screamed. We're going to crash. At the very last moment you expanded your mental shield to its absolute limit, enveloping the entire aircraft. Then came the earth-shattering impact. You didn't know how much time had passed before you woke from the darkness. Your entire body ached. Your head throbbing as if someone had smashed it with a sledgehammer. You struggled to sit up, realizing you were lying amidst ruins. The transport aircraft was unrecognizable, a landscape of twisted metal and burning wreckage. Poland, you looked around, your heart racing. No answer, Poland. You staggered to your feet and began searching through the debris. Finally, you spotted a strand of silver hair beneath a collapsed wing. No, you rushed over and used every ounce of your strength to lift the metal sheet, pinning him down. When you finally saw his condition, your breath nearly stopped. Blood. There was blood everywhere. His military uniform was torn, his body covered in horrific wounds, but what terrified you most was his face, pale as a sheet of paper. Poland. You reached out with a trembling hand to check the carotid artery in his neck. There was a pulse, faint, but he was alive. You immediately released your mental power trying to stabilize his condition. But to your horror, you discovered his mental sea was collapsing. No, this is impossible. He is a S-class sentinel. How could this be, unless... Your pupils suddenly shrank at the final moment of the crash. He had used his own mental power to shield you. At the cost of burning his own life force, you idiot. Tears blurred your vision. Who gave you the right to do that? You had to establish a deep mental connection immediately. It was the only way. But with both of you in such critical condition, a forced connection could cause both your minds to collapse. But you had no choice. Taking a deep breath, you pressed your forehead against his and began the most dangerous attempt of your life. Your mental power flooded like a tide into his shattered mental sea. It was a landscape of devastation. His originally radiant spirit form, a giant silver wolf, was slowly dissipating. Poland, you called out to him in the mental world. Answer me. The giant wolf slowly opened its eyes. Its amber pupils had lost their luster. You shouldn't have come. His consciousness was faint. It is too dangerous. Shut up. You walked up to the wolf and reached out to stroke its fur. Focus on surviving. I can't hold on much longer. The wolf's form was growing more translucent by the second. I'm sorry, I couldn't protect you. I said, shut up. Your mental power transformed into chains, forcibly wrapping around his fading spirit form. You aren't going anywhere without my permission, Malin. Listen, loved villainer. Your voice was trembling, but your tone was incredibly firm. You owe me a chance, remember? What? A chance to prove you can be trusted. You gritted your teeth and injected more mental power. Dead men can't prove anything. A glimmer of light flashed in the wolf's eyes. So you took a deep breath. Live. That is an order. The collision of mental power reached its peak. You could feel your own mental sea trembling, but you didn't stop. You had to save him, no matter the cost. Just as your mental power was on the verge of exhaustion, a miracle happened. The wolf's form began to solidify, and its dull fur regained its silver sheen. Deep within the mental connection, you saw his true spirit form. It was not just a wolf. It was a silver wolf with wings, a mythical creature, the storm wolf. You see it? Poland's consciousness became clear. My greatest secret, beyond S-class. The legendary SS-class spirit form. Now you know. The silver wolf slowly stood up, its massive wings unfurling. I have been suppressing my power all this time. Why? Because too much power leads to loss of control. He looked at you. Like tonight, you fell silent. But after meeting you, the silver wolf walked toward you. For the first time, I feel that perhaps losing control isn't so terrifying. What do you mean? Because you will catch me. He lowered his head, pressing his forehead against your palm. Just like this. The mental connection reached an unprecedented depth in this moment. Your consciousness blended together, and emotions, memories, secrets, absolutely everything was laid bare before each other without reservation. You saw his loneliness, his pride, and the fear hidden deep within his heart. And he saw your strengths, your vulnerability, and... You like me too. His voice was filled with surprise and ecstasy. Shut up. Your face flushed as if it were on fire. Too late. The silver wolf's eyes were full of amusement. I saw it all.